through to the next rounds and further into the playoffs.
Well, Perry, we're getting our guests on gradually, so when they have a question, and I may say, "Hell, you got a question?" and I'll get them to introduce themselves quickly. And everybody here has a vast background. You can see by our hair color, most of us are a little on the elderly side, which is a more experienced side. And like you said, the young coaches you've worked with in national team programs were less receptive to information than the older ones. And I think all of us here realize that the older you get, the more you realize you have to learn. And that's the nature of this group, is a lifelong learning group. So, Tim, you prepared a number of questions, and I think it's a good place to start if you could ask the lead question, and then if anybody else has any, I've got a number in the back of my mind. But Tim, you did a great job with that email, and I wonder if you could just kick off a question, and we could Perry could respond, and so could the group. Go ahead.
Thanks, Wally. Hopefully Sammy can jump on here later so we can get some real goalie perspective. I've worked with Perry a number of times. Terrific guy, and really does a good job. I guess maybe the place to start is the question that popped right into my head when we wandered onto the subject last week. Because I just finished watching the women's U18 championship, and witnessed, after a spectacular tournament, the Swedish goalie pulling herself in the championship game. And it occurred to me right away, I said, geez, I think I've only seen that one other time in my long career at elite hockey levels, really going back to, if you count going back to midget AAA when I was playing, that's 50 years of elite hockey, really. And I've really only seen it twice, maybe one other time. I guess if we include the infamous Patrick Waugh story, that would be the lead case. But I wondered, Perry, your experience with that. How much have you seen it? And really, the key question for a lot of young coaches, especially out there, is how do you best deal with it, like as a goalie coach in particular?
Yeah, I've never seen that before. It was a big shock to me. It says a lot about the difference in, the way kids perceive sport. As a goalie and a coach, to ever think about quitting on your team, because it's basically what that is. That's just a no-no. It doesn't matter. Not every game's going to go your way, but at the same time, you don't stop fighting for your team no matter what, right? It's up to the coaches to say, today's not your day, and then they reset with another goaltender. But to pull yourself, I just don't understand it. I've been trying to wrap my head around that, and even when I played, what little I played, there was no way I would ever quit in the middle of a game, and especially when you're playing for your country. I don't understand that. So it's something that I've never seen, and I really wouldn't know how to deal with that as a coach or as a player.
Your mic, Wally. I just got to take your call.
Perry, I encountered this at an Alberta zone camp. 8 teams, same age, boys hockey. I think it was U18, and I'm mentoring a team whose goalie was struggling, and he struggled to the point where he was crying in the net, literally. And I told them to call a timeout, give him a break, and I got the head coach to talk to him just to see if he could get him refocused. And it just happened to be that he was the weaker of the two goalies, and the powers to be came down at the end of the period criticizing us for doing that. And I just mentioned that as a mentor, I wanted to give the kid a timeout and a chance to reload kind of thing to get back in. So we put him back in for the next period. But that was a situation where I don't know if these discussions go on, but in sports psych, they always tell you to be prepared for any scenario and possibly have those conversations with goalies, imagining every possible situation. But the head coach needs a plan, and the goalies have to understand it, appreciate it, respect it. So, Hal, go ahead, Hal.
Good morning, gang. Hi, Perry. I'm Hal Turse. I'm in Minnesota. And like Tom, I've coached for 5 decades, every level from college all the way down to squirts. A lot of high school, a lot of junior hockey. It's interesting that this scenario, I wasn't aware of the one that you guys were talking about, but I think the Wild's goalie took himself out of the game about 2 weeks ago, Patrick Fleury. He was so upset. I don't know what, I don't watch them very much, but it's on the news, on the sports news a lot. And I think about that position. That's I've never played it, and I don't know if anybody else in the room has here, except maybe you did, Barry. But if you're not seeing the puck well, and I had a goalie in high school that let the first 3 shots of the game go right by him. He never moved in a playoff game. He never, and they were easy. I mean, he went over his glove, over his blocker, right by his feet. And I did take him out. That was my call. And he thanked me afterwards. So he just couldn't, he wasn't focused. He was too nervous. He couldn't focus. At the higher levels, that probably shouldn't be the case. But you know what? They're human just like the rest of us. And if they're having a bad day, I would never criticize one of my goalies saying, Coach, I just don't have it today. So I just toss that out as a counterpoint to, never pulling yourself off the ice. But, in pro hockey, there's too much money, there's too much ego at stake. And I certainly at an international team level, I assume the same. But yeah, I wish we had her on to talk about her experiences, Sammy Joe. Anyways, that's all. Thank you.
Tim Bothwell.
Yeah, thanks. And I certainly can appreciate those thoughts, Hal. As weird as they are at times, goalies are human. Yeah, it's hard to remember that sometimes. But, yeah, of course they are. And it's the uniqueness of the position that makes it extra challenging. All of us who have played as skaters know there are days when we don't have it, but we're really not allowed to quit. And it does happen, same as with the goalies, that the coach makes that decision sometimes to sit you down for a period or bench you for the rest of the game. And I remember one of my games pretty vividly in Buffalo. I was playing with Guy Lapointe in St. Louis, and it was not our night. We were like -4 after like 12 minutes in the game, and it was definitely one of those games like, let me crawl under a rock somewhere. But it's of course, with the goalies, it's different because their mistakes are writ large on the scoreboard and open for all to see. Lots of times, like in my -4, a lot of people wouldn't even notice I'm -4. I did. But so it's quite different. And you bring up Fleury. I do recall that last month sometime, and he left the team after that for some sort of personal reasons, I believe. But whatever the case, there was an extra factor there, but still the same. And I guess I'd interject, like Perry, Charlene Labonte, and you might be surprised to hear that she was the other example that maybe the first example I ever saw. And I will say again, as I did last week, I love Charlene. She's a tremendous competitor and a wonderful person, and she was a great goalie. But I did see her pull herself at the SO Championships one year. Occasionally there can be an injury situation, as we need to keep in mind as well, that the goalie is aware of an injury that might not get related in the immediate moment. But it's kind of a difficult situation. And yeah, like it's tough to see someone like not just quit on their team, but quit on themselves, which is equally important. And interesting, I guess, Perry, that you haven't had that experience to see somebody do it with one of your teams. You must be a good coach, I guess. So, anyway, just some thoughts there. Not really a question.
If I could, I'd like to talk about this because I think it's really important that we understand a couple of things that I think have bolstered how a goalie could even think about pulling themselves outside of an injury, because those I've seen a lot. If a goalie gets injured, you don't really see it because you can't see their facial expression, and then they'll go down, and then the trainer will come out, and the next thing the goalie's off and they're done for the game. Where a lot of times that's just an injury. But here's where I think we can actually get some traction. And I'd love the opinion of the group here on with minor hockey, and I've seen so much of it. There's always a real 1A goalie than a one, not even a one. I'm going to say a 2 to a 3. So the goalies are very different in their style and their abilities, but the goalie that has all the training and all the better technique and all those things, they get the bigger games. And the goalies that are, that 3 and really not at the same level as the other goalie, they get very little difficult games, and they never really get a chance to grow their game because, it's in minor hockey. I think the emphasis is too much on winning rather than development. And it's the one thing that I think uh, should change in minor hockey, because to a lot of these teams, especially, I understand AAA, the kids are spending a lot of money, but at the same time, there's for me and goalies, there's no development because you don't get to try those things and playing those meaningful games where you have to be on top of your game no matter what. But at the same time, the emphasis is so much on winning that you get a couple goals in and you're out, and you never get to build that confidence and that drive to want to be better in the moment. So these are the things I'd like to hear your opinion on as far as minor hockey at the AAA level, that winning is everything.
I guess part of the discussion too can be, and not, sorry, Hal, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
I was just say I would agree with Perry a lot on this. And in our own team, I've got a male goalie who's a second-year kid. This is Bantams, and he played a hell of a game last night. He played the best game of the year. And our other goalie is a female first year. But I just rotate them. And this kid last night drew the best team in the league, who beat us 8-0 8 weeks ago, and it was a 3-0 game, open net last night. And even the other coach came over and congratulated him. But I also noticed with the female goalie, who's not quite as good, she really rises to the challenge against good competition. She's a competitor at heart. She's not quite as big and she's not quite as agile, but I agree with you. These, I do this with the rest of the kids too. We don't really run a power play. We just play hockey, and because all kids need to be in all these situations. Many, many years ago, in a community called Edina, Minnesota, which has produced a couple hundred Division I hockey players. I had 2 goalies on the Bantam team, and one was better than the other. But when it shook out 2 years later, the one that wasn't as good ended up the starting goalie on the varsity, and the other kid relegated JV and quit playing hockey because he never got any better. And so anyways, that's the Minnesota take on this. So good questions, good ideas, you guys.
I just had, there's 3 or 4 things we could go in different directions, but sort of on that note, same note, Hal and Perry, you mentioned it, because really, like, the flip side of this is, as Perry mentioned, you pull a goalie too early, too consistently, and don't allow them to develop the the mental strength to battle through bad situations. Obviously, it sometimes gets to be a delicate balance. Like, do you leave him in or do you leave her in or not? But that quality of being able to, be victimized by a bad bounce or a bad break or just a bad goal, but then bounce back from it and be able to shut the door. I've seen a number of goalies in my time that I had complete confidence in. If they gave up a bad one, they were going to be able to shut the door and give the team a chance if you gave them that opportunity. So it's really important to try to develop that, obviously, especially with young goalies, like work with them actively. Maybe you have to pull them one time. You have the conversation about, I would love to have left you in, and maybe next time I will. I want, it's a really important, maybe, Perry, maybe a critical skill for a goalie to develop that mental strength. And, you go back to the Mike Keenan days where it was, oh, you're out after one, you're back in, you're out after another one, you're back in, where it's just a complete game really with the goalies. But that's the flip side of this, and it's just an interesting discussion.
Yeah, I really think, one of the things that happen with these goalies, a lot of them, they just develop and mature at different levels and different timelines in their own lives. And some kids need to be put in the fire just once and then they get it. Where other kids, you can put them in the fire 3 or 4 times and it's just the maturity is just not there yet. But that doesn't mean that, you know, you just pull them and you leave them. The one thing I always look at when a goalie gets pulled is how long does it take for not even the head coach, an assistant coach is fine, someone to go down and talk to that goalie and let them know what's going on. Because a lot of times I see the pull and you see the goalie comes off and they're frustrated and they don't even understand why they were pulled yet. And then nobody talks to them, so they just go down the rabbit hole of everything they've done wrong in their whole career, and they never really get out of that because every time they get scored on, the first response is to look at the bench to see if they're still in, and that's no way to play to me.
Rick Puttock, I was thinking of you and going to ask you. Go ahead, Rick, with yours.
I wasn't sure you'd ask Wally, so I thought I'd volunteer it.
All right.
But yeah, at the risk of repeating myself from last week, but some of the fellows weren't on. But I've been known to take a goalie out and let the guy going in know that he's only going in temporarily. We settle the goaltender down on the bench and have a chat with him or her, and send them back into the action again. And in one season, the AA midget season, we had a team we were scrambling to put together into a new program. Neither goaltender was what you'd consider a one. Both struggled, so we adopted a process of 5-minute shifts within the game later in the season, and we finished the season that way, where they just changed every 5 minutes based on whistles. Give him a chance for our goaltender fella to have a chat with him, just settle down, regroup, go back in. They got into that rhythm, and the team finished very strongly with that in process. So it obviously didn't disrupt what they were doing. And in my opinion, it strengthened their experience and strengthened their development.
Be great if you had a lefty and a righty in that situation, Rick.
That would really confuse them, Tim.
Al Kirst mentioned change on the fly.
I know.
I really think that's a great idea.
Did that all year long, and the goalies every 4 or 5 minutes, like you were saying, Rick. You know, the team went up the other end, and here comes the goalie, and there goes the next one out on the ice. They played a whole season that way, and they were pretty, mediocre team, but they certainly had a memorable season and had a lot of fun doing it. So just something novel, something new.
Anybody on
the one
board?
thing, if I may,
Go ahead, Barry.
yeah, the one thing, if I may, like with this group, you guys are so in tune to what the game is asking and what the game can give back. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here. You guys are so in touch with everything that goes on in this great game that you're not afraid to try these things. And I think they're amazing. And especially the best part that I've heard so far, there was always communication on what was going on. And if younger coaches understood that the communication would help so much, this game would be so much better. None of you sound like dictators at all about this is one way we're doing it and that's it. You all seem to be so highly educated in this game that it's just fun to listen to. So I appreciate this call so much.
Kim, I wonder if we can get Kim to introduce herself and chime in again.
Sure. Go ahead, Kim.
Hi, Perry. How are you?
Hi, Kim. How are you?
We haven't seen each other in a couple of years.
It's been a couple of years. It's great to see you.
Yeah. Too bad you're still stuck in goalie world, but someone has to do it.
I don't have the skill to do anything else, unfortunately.
Fair enough. I can't do it. I just tell them to stop the little black thing. Question for you. I'm coaching U9 now, Perry. I've really upped the ante here. It's actually way harder than coaching junior.
Oh, yeah.
But, it's interesting to see in the female side how many teams have a dedicated goalie already at U9. And I'm curious your thoughts on that. And perhaps it's different between the boys and the girls. We don't have a dedicated goalie. We haven't all season. And what we've gone to now that we're full ice is we sort of have 4 kids who want to do it a little bit more, but we're not letting them do it every game. And they only practice it, the practice right before we have a game. So they skate out most of the time. But I'm curious your thoughts because, we've lost all our games so far, full ice, and we've outshot every team 2-1. And every other team has a dedicated goalie. So, that seems to be the formula for winning. Not that I care about winning at this level, but it's certainly, we have kids who can barely stand up who want to do it. And we have extra goalie sessions that support them. But we're not willing to make them dedicated. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that. Maybe it's different between the boys and the girls about when that button needs to be pushed.
Yeah, I don't think it's different between boys and girls. I think it's all about, what the team's focus is. And to me, as a kid, I never ever wanted to play out once I played net once. I had no interest in playing out again. And, you know, I don't know if that was just me, but I've also seen it in many young goalies. Uh, when they get that little bug to be a goalie, it's like you can't turn it off. So again, I'm not sure what your kids are all about, but and these are boys, girls, doesn't matter. When that light goes on, when they want to be a goalie, it's all they can talk about. It's all they think about, and it's all they want to do. So, I don't know if you quell that fire a little bit by just not allowing them to play, or kind of give into it and let them run and see where it goes. Because some kids, as everyone knows, their whole focus is scoring goals. but you do want to see them learn the defensive side of the game. So it's, it's one of those things where exposing them to it is great, but at the same time, when they really know what they want, maybe it's time. I'm not sure, but in my my experience, what I've seen is those kids that want to be goalies, that's all they want. Bit of a
Yeah.
long-winded answer, but
Yeah, no,
that's what
that
I've
just to
seen.
follow up, I mean, we gave everyone the chance because when we were playing half ice, of course, you
Mhm.
need to anyways. So everyone got their call. Thankfully, my daughter hated it. No offense. But I don't know how to help her. Maybe it'd be better if she was a goalie, then she wouldn't have to listen to me. But we don't have that kid, and I agree with you. If they have that fire who's like, this is like, that's all I want to do. And I've seen that with U9 girls in the past. We definitely don't have that kid who is like, this is
Yeah.
all I want to be focused on. So I don't know. I look at it as a luxury. It means everyone gets to get a little bit more skill time and a little bit more skating out. And because we do have additional goalie training they can go to once a week, that's built into their fee package. I mean, 8 of our kids could go to goalie training every week. It doesn't matter to us as long as they have the
Wow.
gear.
Yeah.
And so, I look at it best of both worlds. They can do both. And if one of them catches the bug, great. But certainly seems to be a difference maker.
Sure.
The parents, of course, are now starting to talk about it. Is my daughter listening to me now, Tim? No, but we had a major breakthrough. And she told me on Sunday if she had hockey every day, she'd be happy.
Perfect.
2 months ago, I didn't even know she wanted to play anymore. So we're going to ride that train as long as we can. But I'm not letting her play hockey every day, mind you. But just so you know.
That's a good train. Go ahead, Rick. Your mic's off.
Yeah, I'm the guy that's in favor of not locking a 9, 10, 11-year-old guy or girl into a position that they're not going to be easily changeable as they progress. In my experience, I like to see everybody that wants to try the position. 1 or 2 instances is usually enough to cure most of them. Either it's, in my experience, it's too dull, there's not enough action, or it's pretty humiliating when they just keep turning the light on behind them. So, in my own instance, I had 2 boys that played. One is a goalie. He was not a full-time goalie until his bantam years. He played every position on the ice, and to this day, he still plays. He plays goal, but he still gives it up every once in a while for somebody in his beer league team that wants to have a go at it. And he's still fully capable of participating in the game at whatever position, whatever spots are open on the ice. So, just from an overview, I would like not to see the kids being locked into a position at that young age.
I've got a question related to starting goalies and overplaying goalies for the sake of winning. That I don't know that that's a problem anywhere else. Have any of you experienced that with teams in your associations, organizations, communities, areas where one goalie is getting overplayed at the expense of the other? And it's similar to some players, the more talented ones at 11 or 12, getting double shifted. What's your experiences at that? Hell?
You're right on, Wally, and it's right in our program. At the high school level, they've got 3 goalies. The best goalie was hurt for the first 7 or 8 games. And when he came back, the other goalies haven't seen 1 minute of ice time. Even though they're statistically equal so far, the second goalie hasn't played again, and the coach is a win at all costs. And he's going to ride this other kid for the rest of the season. And the second kid, I'm sure, is going to sit on the bench for the rest of the season. And I think he's also a senior. But this is really common here. You ride your best goalie because winning's the only thing that matters in high school hockey in Minnesota.
Perry.
Yeah, I keep hearing about, winning is everything. And then, like I said before, development happens at different stages. Like when you watch an NHL goalie, they don't hit their peak until they're 28 years old because it's such a specialized position and the game has become so fast that, you know, there's just so much to learn as far as hockey IQ, and the mistakes they make can be so minimal. And, you know, a kid has one or two bad games and they never see the ice again. And it's really unfortunate because at the end of the day, the mental side of goaltending is so hard to really grasp. Where if you get pulled over and over again, how are you supposed to develop that thicker skin to be able to play those harder games? And I think those opportunities are definitely there for those kids to be better, and it's just not happening. And it, you know, I hear stories like that all over the place. I go and watch minor hockey games, and it's the same goalies playing all the big games, and the other goalies play the games where they know they don't have a chance to lose. So it's really unfortunate to me.
Tim,
Thanks for that, Barry. Like, so we sort of migrate back to how do you handle that, those rare situations where a goalie might pull themselves. And, you know, really, you know, I like, a lot of ways, I really like Rick's idea, and done it once or twice in the past myself, like when Keenan was in the middle of his whack-a-mole goalie mode in the 80s, where he would routinely change him 2 or 3 times a game at different points. It did occur to me that Rick's plan is a pretty good one, I think, in terms of if you ever meet that situation where the goalie's either really struggling or they do pull themselves. If they're really struggling, tell the other goalie, hey, you're going in for 2 shifts or 3 shifts. I need to talk to the other guy. That's a really good teachable moment where you say, hey, you can express your belief in the goalie and say, we need you back in there. Your team needs you to keep scrapping. It's a really important skill for you to develop. You're going back in. So I really like that idea, especially at developmental phases. As Perry mentioned, and we know it's a really important skill for a goalie to develop that thick skin. And I thought even the idea, like when a scorer, like at the pro level or high levels, if the scorer is really struggling, the message is usually simplify your game. Focus on getting 2 good shots on the net every period if you can, or if you get 4 good shots every game, then you're going to start scoring, because you know the good scorers score whatever 12-14% of the time. But simplify the game, and the same thing with the goalie. Maybe encourage, hey, when you find yourself struggling, focus on, I'm going to stop the next puck. I'm going to stop the next puck, and stay on that. And, you know, we know that 85% of the time, even the worst case scenario, they're going to stop the next puck. So it allows them to develop some success. So I like Rick's idea, and I think it's probably a really, really useful tool for all young coaches, instead of just pulling a goalie, robbing themselves of that opportunity to learn and grow from it, to give them that opportunity. I think it's great.
I wonder if Mike and Tim Taylor have any scenarios that they might have encountered in their hockey experience. Mike, over the years, working with different associations, encountering parents, anything related to goaltending. Anything in your areas?
Yeah, I know for me, especially when the kids get a little older, the tendency for parents is to want to find out, you know, how can I get my kid on a team where he gets to play all the time and only, and what I try to advise is, well, we got to find teams that you can play on that there's another goalie as good as you or in a challenging position, because at some point you're going to be challenged. Like at some point you need to learn how to compete with that player every day in practice. And I think a lot of parents look at it as, oh, my kid's the starter, and then the crappy kid is here. And then to everyone's point, all of a sudden that kid that's not that good never plays. He doesn't improve. He doesn't get better. and then your starter gets hurt, and then what are you going to do? Look down the bench, say, okay, now you're my guy. We want you in. And he's like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, I haven't played at all this year. So I think it's just, I love the fact that, and when I say older, I'm like, even 12U, 12 and older, I just think we should get kids in competitive places, just like we would with our skaters, and find ways to make sure that in practice, they have somebody they can look across at and say, wow, that kid's beating me, or I've got to catch up to that kid, or I want to make sure I stop more pucks than that kid. And that's hard for parents to accept. It's hard for a parent to say, well, why is my kid only getting half the time if he's much, much better? And I said, well, because we're trying to help your son or daughter when the time's going to come that they have to compete against somebody else.
Plus, presumably, both parents are paying the same amount of money to play on your team in many cases.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I think some organizations they'll outright say, well, here, listen, we're not fair. Like, we don't care about being fair. We care about winning. And my point is, well, if you don't do your research as a parent, and if a coach is telling you your kid's my kid, he's the only one, then I'm like, well, I don't know if that's the best situation for you. Maybe it might be for that short little 5 months, but over the course, like when you want to get better, you need to have, steel sharpens steel, right? You need to make sure that you're in a place where the other person is competing against you and you're fighting every day for that opportunity. I personally think that's just the healthiest environment, especially when the kids are at that 14, 15, 16-year-old age group.
Absolutely. And, I think we all know that as we're talking, like the mental part of the game it's important for everybody, but it's critically important for the goalies. And if you're working your son or daughter into a spot where they're never challenged as a goalie and they're always going to play, you're robbing them of an opportunity to grow and learn and deal with adversity. You're cheating your child if you don't make them earn their way. It's just such an important, critical skill. If you really want to develop yourself for the elite level, you're always going to be challenged moving ahead. So I totally agree with you, Mike. Go ahead, Barry.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a different spin on that. I think you're absolutely right in what you're saying. I have goalies all the way up to pros that, when they want to work, they only want to work by themselves. And I've challenged them all. It's like, if you're only going by what you do and you want to work on your own, you never have to compete. And I said, that's not the world that you play in. I said, when you go to any team from at any level almost, when it's competitive, there's another goalie there. And you can learn things from that goalie that might be a little bit better in some areas than you are. And you can also help them learn. And then like my best example is watching the two goalies of the Boston Bruins. They are absolutely ultra competitive, both of them, but they are cheering for each other as much as any goalies I've ever seen. They give big hugs after the game, and I don't think it's phony. I think it's real. That's who they are. But when they're on the ice in practice, they both want the net, but they're okay with whichever one gets it because they've formed that competitive edge. And I think every goalie and every player at every level needs to be able to compete against, like Tim said, steel sharpens steel. And it couldn't be any truer for goaltenders.
You're Mike Wally.
I think the NHL is a great example of earning your role and supporting the other goalie as the in terms of the ups and downs of goaltender consistency. There's a real art to that, psychological game going on at all times. They know it, and I'm sure there's a goalie coach with those teams that knows the goalie and mindset. So I've always had this in the back of my mind. Where does the goalie coach come into that picture at that level, at the competitive levels, in terms of the head coach and the psychology of goaltending? related to being pulled, hanging in there, who gets to play. Anybody got feedback on that? Perry, have you?
Yes, well, I most certainly do. Curtis Sanford is a good friend of mine. He's got the Leafs job, and if people watch the Toronto Maple Leafs a lot, and they realize the biggest difference in the goalie uh, in the game from the goalie's perspective, to me, I know the work of Curtis Sanford, and I believe he has absolutely changed the culture of the goalies in Toronto, where you know both goalies are given opportunities to shine, and because I think I've had many discussions with Curtis, and he has the same philosophy I do. I work harder with the goalie that's not in the net than the goalie that's starting. Right? If they're getting that opportunity, I'm pushing the other kid. Listen, this is where you want to be. So let's dig in a little bit deeper here and find out how do you get the net back. And it would go that way the entire season for me. And that's what I think he's doing because they're both being extremely challenged and they're both rising to the occasion because it's an environment where you feel you're part of that conversation as a goalie. And where some goalie coaches, this is the way you're doing it, get over it. There's no discussion. Where with Curtis, there's always a discussion. And I think that's the biggest change in goalie coaching right now.
Kim?
I wasn't going to go to the NHL direction, but it's a good opening right now because we've got a situation here in Calgary, and I'm going to be really interested. I don't know if they've announced it yet, whether Markstrom is going to start tonight against Chicago, because if I'm correct, Vladar is 8-0-3 in his last 11 starts. Markstrom has been a little inconsistent this year. At what point, or as a policy, the way the NHL teams generally work is, you've got a number one, you've got a number two, you look for your spots to put number two in for a game, or if he plays outstandingly, maybe two, but you always default to going back to number one. But at what point, and the Flames are in a death struggle for a playoff spot right now, what point do you say, hey, number two is freaking playing well, we're going to give him the extra start now, we're going to ride him until he falters? And if you've got a good working relationship, if you've got goalies that are healthy mentally, and I really believe that Markstrom would be one of those goalies that would react well to it. If they just rode Vladar for 5 or 6 or 7, all goalies are going to struggle at some point, and then you put Markstrom back in, dollars to donuts, he's going to respond to that in a very positive way. But it doesn't seem to be the way. And I really question it, especially in this specific example here where, it's so, and Markstrom hasn't been really bad lately. I don't want to mischaracterize that, but he's been inconsistent this year and his stats are way off where they need to be a number one goalie. So there's lots there, but it's just an interesting situation.
Harry?
Oh, well, I'd like to hear what you have to say before I go.
Well, it's more specific to Vladar and Markstrom. He had 2 in a row. And the second one, he wasn't good. They won, but he wasn't good. Now, I don't really believe it's, to earn that opportunity, they had to win and he had to have a good game. And that's the head coach's call. So that's my opinion. And it's a fine line because Markstrom's getting the big dollars. He's the guy they've committed to. They brought in the organization. And the psyche, they don't want to destroy a psyche. And I agree with Tim. He may be a great goalie teammate like Vladar has been. It may be the right time to go with him. I'm just not sure that it's the right time yet. That's just my opinion anyway.
Yeah, I'll just follow up on that, Perry, really quick. I don't disagree with you, Wally. Like the third goal, I think it was the third goal the other night, was a stoppable puck, and you could say he didn't play well, but really the other two goals were not really his doing. And if he was the number one goalie, people would look past that one goal and just routinely start him in the next game. And that's part of my point is the number two doesn't get that opportunity too often because he was good, but then he let in a questionable one. And that's really what Markstrom's been doing all year. And it's his history. So it's an interesting debate. I'm not going to be surprised at all if they go back to Markstrom tonight. But at some point, they have to get off that gravy train because really, how many times have we as coaches said, well, you found a way to win the game, you get to start again if you're in that mode as a coach. Like, it's making the stop at the right time. And anyway, it's just an interesting discussion. Go ahead, Perry. Sorry for.
No, I love that. I love that, the back and forth on this. And what I find really interesting with Markstrom this year, because I've always been a big Markstrom fan, and I'm at the point now where he has to question what is really going on in his game because I'm not sure he knows. And as a goalie coach, I see things that he does where, I've heard some of you guys even say it today. He's just not seeing the puck well. And that to me is have a seat, let's work on your game outside of practice. Let's find out what's really going on, why you're thinking the way you're thinking, and why you're reacting the way you're acting. Why aren't you seeing the puck? Because you are paid a gazillion dollars to stop the puck, and you're very inconsistent. I would agree with that wholeheartedly. He's very inconsistent this year, and Leonard can give them enough goaltending that they can be in the game, and it's not replacing him, but he needs to have a seat. I think, uh, and I'm kind of learning more about how the Calgary Flames are coached, and it is, you know, when you're on top of your game, you're going to get rewarded, but when you're not, you're not. That's just the way he coaches. So I really agree that, with Markstrom, he needs to figure his game out again. I think he's overthinking everything, and that to me is a goalie coach's job.
And that's an interesting point, Perry. That really is the Daryl way. And Daryl's a terrific coach and a wonderful person. Is you got to earn your keep, and if you're not on your game, you're maybe going to drop down a bit. I mean, people, there's some give and take there, but generally speaking, that's his approach. And it's interesting that it doesn't seem to be the approach with the goalies, and that could lead into okay, is the head coach the main goalie coach, or is the goalie coach the main goalie coach? Who's really in charge? There's different ways to do it. But before we go there, like you sort of open the door, Perry, and maybe help educate some coaches out there. If you're the Flames goalie coach now, how do you help Markstrom if we just concede for the moment that he's having trouble seeing the puck? What kind of things can you do at practice to help him work on that, feel more confident? Because really that's what it comes down here, is building the confidence that, hey, I'm on my game, I'm seeing the puck, I'm feeling good. How would you go about that if you're the Flames goalie coach?
So Tim, great question. Here's how that works for me. And Tim, you actually said it earlier today. Simplify. Like, to me, he has to go back to the basics of, one player, one shot. Get used to seeing the release of the shot, because that seems to be what's missing to me. Like, he doesn't have his feet set for the shot, which is goalie 101. He's always looking to do more things, and it's like no, like the puck doesn't care where it's going, but if you see the release, your response is going to be better. I think his setup on the shot is where it starts. So you have to go back to the basics. You have to simplify your game. He's trying to do too much. He's never really set. Pucks are going by him that he's not even moving. And it's like, to me, his skill set is all about he has to see the release and he will react much better. So it's really about simplify his game, just like you said with a player, make things easier for you to do, and then you'll see different results.
That's sorry, Wally. Oh, yeah. Just wanted to interrupt really quick. Like that's well said, Perry. And I guess my next observation, I seem like a non-Flames fan, but I really am of the view that they're just not a solid group defensively. They've got all kinds of holes, and I didn't hear the news on Tanev. I hope he's not out long term, but that might be part of what's going on in Markstrom's head. Is I've always got to be on the lookout for the next grade A scoring chance that's left wide open because somebody's not doing their job. It just seems to me that they give up even as they outshoot teams in lots of games by wide margins. They give up far too many grade A scoring chances to be a real serious playoff team. Sorry, Wally.
Yeah, I just wanted to get back to the minor hockey theme. Two things. The first thing we talk about a little later. Some teams just have one goalie. I think, Tim, you have one goalie on your team. I'm not sure what the age is. Tom has one goalie, and he would prefer to have two goalies. So planning a practice with one goalie versus two goalies is different. That's another topic. The other thing, Perry, and I want to address it now because I think this is very valid at any level of hockey, maybe except pro. You said goaltending one-on-one, and what was the skill that you said?
Yeah, you don't get to sharpen your steel by watching other goalies. To me, that's where you learn the most, is by watching other goalies in the net. And then you go, well, I like that, or I don't like that. Both of them are very valid when it comes to growing your game. Like when a goalie wants to train all by themselves, it just doesn't make sense to me at any level, even pro. I don't like it. Like, no, I want you to work with this guy, and I want you guys to really feel that competition between each other, but understand you're working for the same common goal, wins. At the pro level, it's just about winning.
I just want to talk about minor hockey. The
Yeah.
goaltending 101 is the stance and the feeling of your edges and being square to the puck by being able to move and feel your edges. And I watch goalies in a warm-up and goalies having a bad game in minor hockey, and I'm talking AAA, AA, and any age U18 and under, but minor hockey. And when they're sort of floating in the net and jerking around and they're not stable and solid in their stance, I just have them shuffle skate to feel their edges. I've had pass that on to goalies that have come to the bench, made them shuffle skate right there, be solid in the stance, square to the puck. It's like you say, go back to basics, simplify it. And with minor hockey kids, that's the thing. They're bouncing around in there. Now, the biggest thing with NHL goalies is I think they're going down too soon. And it's almost like dodgeball, and goaltending is not dodgeball. And the ability to maintain your stance longer, coping with the vision and screening, it's a very big challenge at the pro level. But at the minor hockey level, just make sure they're strong in their stance and square to the puck. And the old shuffling sideways, feeling your edges, it's just fundamental to playing goal and being set and square to the puck. So the other question later is one goalie versus two goalies at practice, at games. What age group, Tim Taylor, what age group is your team?
We're it's a middle school team, so we have the youngest kids are in 6th grade and the oldest are in 8th grade.
So that would be U13.
Yeah, then we have some second year you you call it U13 in Canada. So we have some second year 12 and under players and some Bantam age kids on the team.
Okay. Well, Tom, you're used to the two goalie scenarios and the flow and the whole ice kind of thing. And how do you adapt with that philosophy of coaching and wanting two goalies? Now you've got one. How do you adapt?
And we get a lot of half ice practices, so you just see, like anything, you see the space you have, the amount of players you have, and you adapt. Like our last practice, we practiced with the other U13 team. So the first half hour we did stuff on our own with one goalie, and then we had a full ice game, but their goalie wasn't there. So we put the net face down, so they had to hit the top of the net for a goal to one end. You couldn't hit any of the metal, and we played a full ice game that there had to be at least one pass in each zone. And I blew the duck call if they carried the puck too long. So, you just, like in anything, you have to adapt. And, and the thing about goalie progression, I've got a goalie, she's pretty good, but she's 5 feet tall. So I look at her parents and they're kind of average size. So, she's probably going to end up to be, her mom's probably about 5'5". But, that's the thing in kids hockey, how big are kids going to get? Are they always going to be tiny? Like I remember when I had this team and both Mason Raymond and Ryan Duncan were absolute tiny. And Mason grew to be 6 feet and Ryan grew to be 5'6". Ryan won the Hobie Baker, but he never got the good chance at the big league, even though he was really good, because he was just so small, so you never know how they're going to grow, but they're going to grow some anyways. But when I'm coaching minor hockey, I just rotate the goalies game to game. And if they don't have it that day, I'll pull them out, and sometime I'll pull them out and talk to them and put them back in. And, it all depends, but, so you have every scenario when you coach over a long time, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Pinelli.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think one of the great things I've noticed from the coaching education program over the last few years, especially with USA Hockey, is the emphasis on teaching coaches how to work with your goalies in practice. And when you talk about, a lot of it was like, a lot of the youth hockey stuff at the mite level, 8U and 10U is all about getting the reps in, getting the time in, go. A lot of, just keeping kids moving. And I think what ends up happening is we don't allow our goalies then to finish plays. Like, okay, if a shot gets taken, the goalie can track it, freeze it, control it, move it. So I think one of the things that I've done, a lot in the last couple of years is make sure that the coaches that I work with, really put some emphasis on the fact that if you want your goalie to finish a play, then let them finish the play in practice. If you want your goalies to be able to track pucks, then you have to have drills and games that allow them to track pucks. And I think that's something that's really been encouraging for me watching the last couple of years in the coaching education program, is that emphasis on the fact that we have to allow the goalies, if we, it's the same thing. If I have a coach that says, hey, Mike, can you help me? My girls just never go to the net. I can't get them to crash the net. I go, well, every drill you have, they shoot at the top of the circle and they go to the line in the corner for the last 25 weeks. So what would you expect them to do in a game? And I think it's the same thing our goaltenders. If we want our goaltenders to set up, if we want our goaltenders to track pucks, if we want our goaltenders to compete until the puck is completely frozen or out of the zone, then we have to design our drills and our practices, to replicate that. And I think that's been done a much better. We've done a much better job at that, I think, the last couple of years.
If I could interject really quick, Perry, on that exact note, Mike, and I totally agree, is, when any of the teams I've worked with, whenever we're playing small area games, you see it a lot. A lot of coaches just allow the goalies to make a save and then throw the puck to somebody or try to move it. I always tell our goalies, hey, freeze the puck if that's the play. Like, play this small area game the way you would play a real game. Don't get into throwing the puck ahead or casually from your knees, moving the puck. Freeze it, and I'll give them a new puck to play. I always preferred that because it develops that good habit versus getting into, sort of summer hockey mode way too often. Go ahead, Barry. Sorry.
Yeah, just real quick, just on that point, that's exactly what we'll do. We'll say, oh, well, you will even yell like, ooh, that's a save, and then the kids will know that's the cue to turn around and find the puck from the coach, that there's a new puck now in play. Like, that puck, that old puck, is no longer in play because the goalie made a save, they froze it, and that's done. And it lets the goalie set up too, right? The puck now goes to a different area of the ice. It allows the goalie to kind of regroup and find their crease again.
Yeah, we just yell out puck, and they know it. And anyway, go ahead, Barry.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up practice now that we get into this part. I've had so many arguments with coaches on, what they want from their goaltender. I have teams that will not allow their goalie to play the puck at any, and this is a competitive AAA team that will not allow their puck to come out, their goalie to come out of the net on a rim, on a dump in. They won't let the goalie play the puck in any situation. Like, I've even asked drills, dump the puck in on the goalie to see what they do. It's going to disrupt the flow of the practice. It's like, but that's the game, right? And it's really unfortunate. And this is what I mean about younger coaches. They're so eager to see the drills on YouTube that they think look really flashy because they're so fast, and they want flow drills for 90 minutes. And it's like, well, I'm sorry, but you're not going to flow drill a game. And when you get to practice, your goalies won't come out of the net to play a rim because that's a play with most offensive teams. They're going to rim a puck the other side, so it's an advantage, because they know your goalie's not coming out. And if you dump it in, the goalie's totally confused because we never work on it in practice. Like, all I want the goalie to do when I dump in, if you can't catch it, make sure it's going to a quiet area, deflected to the corner. But if you're not working on that in practice, how are you supposed to be good at it? Right? So these things to me are really lacking. And I'm just saying, in my area in Ontario, it's not a focus at all for these goalies to be involved in practice. And I've had many conversations and have hit nothing but brick walls. You're just the goalie guy. Make sure the goalie stops the puck. And it's like, there's so much more a goalie can do, but okay, we'll do it your way.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, especially in the girls' hockey and even in the college, the goalies, if a puck is shot in from the red line or whatever, instead of standing there setting it up, they go down in the butterfly and they put their stick flat on the ice, and some of them want to catch it on the way there where it'll bounce off the glove and bounce out, but then they freeze it. So you get face-offs in your end all the time. And like my goalie right now, every single time, I mean, players could be crossing the blue line and she's freezing the puck already. So what do you do to, get them to set the puck up and all this kind of thing?
Great question. To me, all that is practice. You have to practice these things. Like, if you have a drill with a dump in, what is the goalie doing? And get them to think about, okay, my D's coming back, my D's opening and they're showing me their stick. I'm going to make a play with my stick. I'm going to paddle down and make a nice pass. Like, those are things that, unfortunately, a lot of these goalies don't get to work on in practice. With a lot of goalies, the first thing they do if something happens, like say they go to make a pass and the puck goes underneath their stick and in the net, the first thing they do is look at the coach and they see the reaction and they'll never do it again. Where it's like, if coaches understood let them do it. They're going to make mistakes, but they will get better.
Do you want them
and they
always
will.
going down in the butterfly?
No, not at all. No, that's all situational. Like if it's a hard drifting puck, like you don't want to see that bounce just in front, it goes through. But you know, if it's just a dump in on the ice, make a play. But that's
they should
all giving them the
stop,
confidence to
set
make
it up.
that play, right? What's that? Sorry?
So they should stand up, stop it, and either pass or set it up by the net for the D? Okay.
100%.
Because that's
And
a,
that's a skill they just have to work on.
yeah, okay, thanks.
Welcome.